Well, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on when this finds you. Just want to talk a little bit today about a subject, subject area that's not talked about much, in my opinion. At least I haven't come across much on it and my experiences. But you remember, I did a video not too long ago titled America, the Great I Am. Well, I'm just going to give you a little bit more information. This is not all based on America, but I'm going to do a little bit of talking about how America played some parts in this subject that I'm going to talk about. And the thing is, if you start a lie and repeat the lie and get people to buy into the lie, it automatically becomes their truth. We have a lot of people say their truth nowadays, their truth. And the thing is, there's only the truth. You and I don't have a separate truth from the truth. And this even applies to our understanding of Christianity and some of the things we've been taught. I just finished watching a video probably about an hour ago, and the guy was talking about what name should we be addressing our Father. And he laid it out, and he talked about God and, the meaning of God, and he talked about Lord and the meaning of Lord, and he went back to the old Hebrew meanings of them. And I'll tell you this much, it wasn't good. But, he did an excellent job on that, and if I remember, I might link the video in the description box, because I'm not here to talk about that. I'm here to talk about another area. And as I always say, whenever I talk about something, you don't agree with it, that's a you problem. But also in that same context, if you don't agree with what I talk about, go do your own research. I'm always an advocate for people doing their own research. Never take my word for anything, because I'm human. I can make mistakes too. So the only way many people believe something if they go get the information themselves. I'm sorry. Guess I've been watching Family Feud a little too much. And so applying our understanding of Christianity is a real serious situation. The more I study, and some of the things we've been taught, the problem with promoting lies is when a truth seeker learns and tries to get others to understand, they a lot of times get mocked, they get ridiculed, they get ostracized, because no one wants to have their illusions and beliefs challenged and shattered, especially if those beliefs were given to them by people they love and trust. And the problem is many of those we love and trust are only repeating what they were taught themselves, and they never ventured out and tested to see if what they were being taught were true. No more is this more apparent than those of us who believe in the Bible, because I believe in the Bible. Regardless of everything I talk about, I still believe in the Bible. I still read my Bible. I still cross-reference and do things with expository dictionaries, Bible dictionaries, and all of that. I have all types of biblical dictionaries. I have all type of versions and translations of the Bible. And that's just me, because I want to have a greater understanding. And so the last thing I ever want to do when it comes to, I'm going to say it this way, Yah's word, is mislead anybody in his word. And so the word pastor, and that's not my topic either. I'm just rambling right now before I get started, because I need to pull up a couple of things that I want to read to y'all. But the word pastor is only mentioned once in the Bible, and that's in Ephesians 4:11. And you'll have many pastors and preachers and ministers out there say, well, pastor and shepherd and all of that stuff is the same. But ironically, the Bible only mentions pastor once. And when you try to cross-reference with shepherd in the Bible, you never see pastor and shepherd equated. I mean, but I'm not the biblical scholar. You know, I didn't go to seminary. But if you think about it, pastor was only mentioned one time in the Bible. The word pastor. You can look up and down your Bible, front to back. Pastor, the word pastor was only mentioned one time. And it was mentioned in a context with some other positions. So think about this. The Messiah was never called pastor. The disciples were never called pastor. John was never called pastor. Paul was never called pastor. But ironically, we give these men so much respect, even when it's not earned, that when you say something contradictory to their teachings, you are the one who gets questioned. They never question the pastor because he's supposedly God's representative, not realizing you also are God's representative. Pastor that I went to school with and we worshiped together for a number of years asked a question one day. And when he asked the question, he said, well, I'm only posing this question to pastors. So I answered too. And then he gonna have the nerve to ask me, so Myron, when did you become a pastor? I said, when I became born again, just like you. And how can I say that? Well, 1 Peter 2:9 says, but you are his chosen people, the king's priests. You are a holy nation, people who belong to God. And like I said, so people who belong to Yah. He chose you to tell about the wonderful things he has done. He brought you out of the darkness of sin into his wonderful light. But I'm here to talk about a different subject today that's not rooted, for the most part. I mean, it is rooted in Christianity. And before I get into that, like I said, I'm just kind of talking and rambling. It's late at night, and I should be trying to go to sleep, but I'm actually recording this the day before Labor Day. Well, I guess it'll be Labor Day by the time I finish. But my sister told me I've started staying up late at night again. My sister told me I need to stop that and go to sleep at night. So I'm going to do this while it's on my mind. But I talked about the word Christian and Christianity in that video, America the Great I Am. And if you haven't listened to it, go back and check it out. And if you think you find value in some of these things I talk about, don't hesitate to share with others you think might benefit. I mean, if you do, fine. If you don't, fine. It doesn't matter to me. I'm just saying. But the Bible mentions the word Christians for the first time in the book of Acts. And, the Apostle Luke wrote the book of Acts. And open in Luke chapter 11, verse 26, this is what it reads. The disciples were called Christians first at Antioch. Now, where does the word Christian come from? Sometimes when I present information like this, people think I'm trying to cause division. No, the system is the great divider, not me. I just present information that's not readily accessible. Well, I'm not going to even say readily accessible. I mean, it's accessible. A lot of people just don't want to go and look for it. And, now the college football season started, high school football season started, NFL season getting ready to start, Little League getting ready to start, middle school getting ready to start. So that's why people can't think about more weightier matters of their life because they're too wrapped up in entertainment and amusement. And if you want to get a real education, go study the etymology of the word amusement. So the system is the great divider, not Myron. We shouldn't get upset with those who present another thought process. We should get upset with those who misled us. Now, Antioch was located in Syria at that time, and it was what they call one of the early centers of Christianity. and the followers of Jesus were first called Christians. And go back and listen to America, the Great I Am, and you'll actually hear what the followers of Jesus, and that's not his name either, but that English translation, well, like I said, the guy talked about the name of God, and he said that the English translations was a pagan language, and like I said, if I remember, I'm going to link it in this one. But there were actually many groups of people who followed the Messiah. So it actually took a good while before everybody started calling themselves Christian. A friend actually asked me the other day, what year did the term Christian become a word? And I told him I think around the year 197, 197. And as I mentioned previously, the followers of the Messiah never called themselves Christians. If you actually do a word search on the word Christian in different languages, all of them say Christ followed, but the actual word starts with the letter K. Now, I'll be honest with you, I haven't done enough research yet on Christians with a K, but I actually did come across some information that Christianity with a K is satanic, and that's why it was changed to the letter C to make it sound Christ-like. Like I said, I haven't done enough research on it yet, so don't say I said that. I came across that information. I looked up that information, so I got some more research to do on my own. Because, when I came across the information, it was talking about christening your children with a K. And it said when you christen your children with a K, you were actually offering them up to Satan. Hey, I didn't say that. I'm just telling you about the information I came across. But today, what I want to talk about is Christian missionaries. Amazingly, the missionary work is rooted in racism. Most of it was tried on Africans and Japanese. But the difference is the Japanese smelled a rat real quick and discarded it. And, the funny thing is, as blacks, we have a strong tendency to trust others more than those who share similar skin complexions with us, especially if that skin complexion is white. Now, I'm not promoting division. Like I said, we got some bad thought processes in our country. And if you want to understand the black and white issue, go back and listen to the video I did on the jaw shakers. And that'll give you a pretty good concept of how we got to this black and white divide. But you know why we had this tendency to believe certain people? Because colonizers, i.e. white people, told us and showed us that Christ was white. So we bestowed godlike qualities, and I'm going to just say godlike, and if I just slip up, remember what I said about the name of the Father, or the title of the Father. But we bestowed godlike qualities on all white people because of this. And believe it or not, missionaries are and have always been a part of colonization, hiding behind Matthew 28:19, where Christ said, "Go out and make disciples of all nations." Now, I'm going to read you something that I came across some time back from a guy, King Leopold of Belgium. And King Leopold wrote a letter to some missionaries, and he was describing to them how missionary visits were to operate. And he ruled over in Belgium in the late 19th and early 20th century. And, I still like to keep it street every now and then. So, Leopold and his corporate homies, forced the Congolese people to, harvest rubber, and his representative was actually cut off the hands of those who failed to meet their quotas. Ain't that something? Congo actually gained its independence around 1960, and that when they had their first election, well, where their prime minister was a guy named Patrice Lumumba. And some of you may have heard that name before. If you hadn't, go study it, Patrice Lumumba. And it's amazing that Lumumba was immediately dismissed by the president over there, because the president was pro-Belgium and he was pro-American. And his name was Joseph Kasavubu. I think that's how you say his name. And a few months later, Kasavubu announced that Lumumba was dead, killed. He said, but the villagers had killed him. But everybody knew it was a lie from the start. So here are the words from King Leopold to the missionaries. And I'm not going to read the whole speech. I'm just going to read you some of it. Reverends, fathers, and even go to your Bible and see what the Bible says about calling men reverend. I can't remember that exact scripture off the top of my head. But I think the Bible says call no man reverend. And so Leopold said, reverends, fathers, and dear compatriots. The task that is given to fulfill is very delicate and requires much tact. You will certainly go to evangelize, but your evangelization must inspire above all Belgium interests. Your principal objective in our mission in the Congo is never to teach the niggers to know God. This they know already. They know that to kill, to sleep with someone else's wife, to lie, and to insult is bad. Have courage to admit it. You're not going to teach them what they know already. Your essential role is to facilitate the task of administration and industrials, which means you will go to interpret the gospel in a way it will be the best to protect your interests in that part of the world. Isn't that amazing? And we see that still right today. Everybody be trying to get them Cecil Rhodes scholarships. That's the most prestigious scholarship in the world. But they don't even understand what Cecil Rhodes did to get his wealth. But for these things, you have to keep watch on disinteresting our savages from the richness that is plenty in their underground. To avoid that, they get interested in it and make you murderous competition and dream of one day to overthrow you. Your knowledge of the gospel will allow you to find text ordering and encouraging your followers to love poverty. That sounds like slavery, right? When they told us, the slave masters told black slaves that your reward is going to come once you die, when you get to heaven, but you're not supposed to have anything on earth of any substance. So you encourage them to love poverty, like happier are the poor because they will inherit the heaven. And it's very difficult for the rich to enter the kingdom of God. You have to detach from them and make them disrespect everything which gives courage to affront us. I make reference to their mystic system and their war fetish, warfare protection, which they pretend not to want to abandon. And you must do everything in your power to make it disappear. Your action will be directed essentially to the younger ones, for they won't revolt when the recommendation of the priest is contradictory to their parents' teachings. The children have to learn to obey what the missionary recommends, who is the father of their soul. You must singularly insist on their total submission and obedience. Avoid developing a spirit in the schools. Teach students to read and not to reason. Evangelize the niggers so that they stay forever in submission to the white colonialists, so they never revolt against the restraints they're undergoing. Recite every day, happy are those who are weeping because the kingdom of God is for them. Convert always the blacks by using the whip. Keep their women in 9 months of submission to work freely for us. 9 months, that's about how long you carry a baby, huh? And it's even, a whole lot of information out there. They were out there impregnating the Congolese women and then disappearing on them. But it was working for the system. But make sure that niggas never become rich, seeing every day that it's impossible, for the rich to enter heaven. Make them pay tax each week at Sunday Mass. That sounds like tithing. Y'all do know tithing is a tax. Use the money supposed for the poor to build flourishing business centers. I mean, that's what churches of all colors are doing with the money anyway. Building flourishing business centers called churches. Institute a confessional system, which allows you to keep good detectives and denouncing any black that has a different consciousness contrary to that of the decision maker. Teach the niggas to forget their heroes and to do only ours. See, and if you think about that, the Black History we get in school up until, recently, always taught us about our degradation, our ancestors' degradation. And the only hero we were supposed to have was Martin Luther King. But they never taught us about all those other guys. Up until recently, they didn't teach us about Booker T. Washington. Up until recently, they didn't teach us about Frederick Douglass. But they somehow managed to teach us about W.E.B. Du Bois. They never taught us about S.B. Fuller. They never taught us about A.G. Gaston. They never taught us about Reginald Lewis. They never taught us about Madam C.J. Walker until recently. They never taught us about Annie Turnbull Malone, who was wealthier than Madam C.J. Walker. So you got to know this. So they did the same thing over there that they were doing to us here. Never letting us know about our heroes. And we did a piss poor job as a people teaching them ourselves. Let me continue. Never present a chair to a black that comes to visit you. Don't give him more than one cigarette. Never invite him for dinner. Even the African converts who today manage to own the churches in Africa, the priests, bishops, archbishops, cardinals, etc., of the Roman and Protestant sects, and especially also those who evangelize born-again Christianity, still serve the same mandate. Now, those Africans who converted to Christianity before the colonial conquest, there was a guy named Afonso I of Bakongo, and he was over there in the 15th century. And he couldn't discern the true purpose of Christianity that was actually given to black folks. Afonso was a black guy. And this is probably why they became easy prey for the colonials and the missionaries and the white traders and pirates who followed them. Now, isn't that amazing? That was pretty lengthy, but I wanted to show y'all how these folks think. And even though he wasn't a missionary or anything, go read a 1985 speech from South African President P.W. Botha, P-W-B-O-T-H-A, and get you some of that and see how that relates to what blacks are dealing with around the world as well. You see, by the late 1950s, missionaries, they were heavily involved over in the Congo. Like I said, they didn't get their independence to 1960. And during that time, it was over 2,000 of the missionaries in the Congo. And of that 2,000, in between, it was probably close to between 1,000 and 1,500 of them were American. And they were actually over in Africa. They were changing over there, trying to change ideas about race and colonialism. And like many Americans at the time, probably today too, those missionaries were actually in support of the expansion of United States power. When Jesus said in Matthew to go make disciples of all nations, Jesus didn't say go make disciples and make them into little spin-offs of American exceptionalism. But that's what the American missionaries were doing. And since they were missionaries, they were and going abroad, they were more than likely to know a great deal about the countries in which they were supposedly serving. You see, it seems like the objective of Christian missionaries was to learn all about the culture and behaviors of those countries in order to report back home and then get, let me see what I want to say. They report back home, and then so they can infiltrate what was then termed a third world country. See, a lot of them became third world countries because they were going over there plundering. And it's amazing how those countries rich with resources get plundered by colonialists and then get called third world. See, missionaries had lived what they were over there evangelizing, but they were still living in degrees of pretty much, I ain't gonna say wealth, but they were living pretty decent lives, and they a lot better than the people they were colonizing. I mean, evangelizing, and they had a lot of privilege because they were missionaries. Because see, what you need to understand, somebody has to fund them, and so they also had what they call mission stations too, and they didn't only establish mission stations, but they established churches and schools too, and, well, I guess hospitals as well. And those missionaries saw themselves as racially, racially and religiously superior to the people around them. The people they were evangelizing. Most of the missionaries over in the Congo at the time, and like I said, I'm going to get to some of the American stuff too. Like missionaries in many other parts of the world, they had a whole lot of possessions back then, and most of the missionaries were white and were frequently hostile to the traditional beliefs and habits of the local people, whom they often saw as lazy and childlike. Now, doesn't that sound familiar? If you go back and you study the history of this country, and you listen to all these white folks talk about don't come across our border illegally, don't come over here, where your ancestors came from? Huh? Answer that question. Your ancestors, a lot of your ancestors were released from the prisons over in Europe and came here because they told them, long as you don't come back, we'll let you stay out of prison. That's how a lot of y'all ancestors got here. But y'all got the nerve to tell somebody else stay out y'all country. It wasn't even y'all country. It was black people here before y'all. And y'all notice I didn't say Native Americans. It was black people here before what y'all call Native Americans. Go study the history of these Native Americans. Black people descended from Noah's son, Sem, not Shem. That's an English translation, Shem. Black people descended from Sem, S-E-M. What do you call one of the groups of Native Americans? Seminoles. But I ain't here to talk about that either. But a lot of the schools were developed by these missionaries to educate blacks, but it was amazing the education that they received wouldn't even give them access to high schools and colleges because their schools didn't carry the credentials in order to put them in a position to get the higher education. They couldn't even get certified to go to high school and college out of them schools. And because of that, what we term decent jobs were hard to come by because the students who went to the Belgian created Catholic schools would be the ones who benefited from a better education. So the education that blacks received was useless. Does that sound familiar? But what you need to know is the whole purpose of the substandard education was for the sole purpose of finding for the blacks to only be able to find work and establish church because they didn't want them to have any success outside of the church or the mission system. So y'all got to go study this stuff. Now we've heard the phrase time heals all wounds. Well, if time has healed all wounds, why are blacks still living this way, and why are we overchurched as a people? Why have our predominantly black schools historically been treated this way in this country? Why did a degree from a predominantly white university, especially some built off of slave labor, carry more prestige than a predominantly black one right today? It's because the system still considers black education as substandard. It was made that way. Even though most of what I've always shared is talked about so far is for missionary work overseas, I don't know, we had the problems here as well. The reason missionary work is not talked about in this country as much is because it's largely an overseas project, and missionary racism gets hidden within the Christian church. How can I say that? Look at how hard the white church tried to show solidarity with black folks during the George Floyd and Ahmaud Arbery incidents. Where was the white church before then? Why were white churches not preaching unity before then? Why were they not inviting all of these black preachers into their churches before then? Now, that's not 100%, but it was happening quite a bit at the time. And after the incidents died down, have you seen them black pastors in them white churches again? Because now we ain't back to unity again, we back to segregation. Southern Baptist Christians back then were upset about integration and felt that segregation was the order that was needed to maintain two classes of people, even though Romans 2:11 says God is no respecter of persons. And I'm actually working on a video right now that's going to come out later. I probably won't upload it to this platform. It's going to probably go to the other platform I upload it to, because I'm going to talk about the two-class system in a way that's not going to be favorable to some people. And I don't want it to get flagged on this platform. But Romans 2 says God is no respecter of person. It doesn't say white person, black person, or brown person. It's not a conditional statement. The Southern Baptists was so firm in their conviction that one of them said God advocates segregation. But you know what? It wasn't just the Southern Baptists. All denominations were against the civil rights struggle. All of them. And they felt that missionary work was complicated. And they knew that missionary work was being also complicated abroad because a lot of your missionaries held racist views. And the reason blacks abroad were skeptical of missionaries is because they were hearing reports out of Moscow from the old USSR, and those reports were talking about racial injustice was getting worse for blacks in America from whites. So those blacks in Africa wanted to know what those white people were coming to their countries for. USSR was a communist regime and was heavily recruiting blacks through injustice and trying to convince them that racism was so bad that they needed to work together to destroy America. Well, as a side note, America doesn't need any help. It's destroying itself. Back to our original programming. But Radio Moscow was the place that was getting that information back to them. And what they were trying to do was create more resentment toward white missionaries from blacks in order to use blacks to help them bring America to its knees. And you need to study who the communists were back then and are right now, still today. And it's not a country, it's an ethnicity. Now, the reports from old Radio Moscow, they were negative. They were bad toward America. And America was using missionaries to promote positive images by using Christ as the way in. Now, that was actually, it wasn't all missionaries, because that was a lot of I guess we could say infighting between the missionaries, because you had some who were really doing what Christ advocated, make disciples. They didn't have a racial agenda, but they didn't have a colonist viewpoint behind it. And so there was a lot of fighting, but the great majority of them wanted to maintain separation. And that's unfortunate. And it was so bad between them that the racist missionaries actually maintained separate facilities from the non-racist missionaries. That sounds familiar, separate but equal, huh? And like I said, the non-racist missionaries were a smaller group. And I guess I'm about to wrap this up right now. Like I said, I could talk on this stuff for long. I might do some more videos on missionary work, but I think this is enough to kind of get you questioning when you hear churches. And I'm not saying all missionaries today are racist, but it does have its roots in colonialism and racism and establishing white superiority. Hey, don't take it from me. Study it for yourself. And it doesn't matter where white people go, they want to colonize and make everything their own. And but then they want to sit there and do people like that and then talk about, let's be one, let's be united. After they done plundered and stole and manipulated and did everything else, rob, steal, kill, everything the Ten Commandments advocate against, they do it and didn't want us to be one. And I've said before, I'm not trying to create no division. You got to study your homework. You got to go do your homework. And you got to understand why a lot of black resentment is so high. See, this stuff is ingrained subconsciously. But it's not just ingrained subconsciously. If we go back and look at what happened to our ancestors historically, it's ingrained physically. It's ingrained mentally. So you can't just expect no apology, I'm sorry, to fix that. Now, I'm just telling you how it is. As much as we want to say we're equal now, we're still not equal. We're still not. An entire being of this country, we have Fortune 500 companies. So that means 500 companies, right? In an entire existence of this country, since the Fortune 500 have been at play, we have had 16, maybe 17 black CEOs. Look at your sports franchises. How many black CEOs do you have? Up until recently, you had that collective group that, that went in and did some things. But look at all your sports franchises: baseball, basketball, football, hockey, soccer. How many of your owners are black? And so I'm just saying, all these folks out here, how many owners, take Tyler Perry out the picture. How many black owners you got in Hollywood? And I'm talking about major players. I'm not talking about, and I'm not putting down the smaller enterprise. I'm just saying, take away Tyler Perry and how many major players you got. And can we really call Tyler Perry a major player when everything he's doing is making black men look like the buffoons and promoting homosexuality, promoting cross-dressing? I mean, can we really say that's positive for the black community? Yeah, we can say he's got the money, but can we say it's positive? And so we ain't on no equal footing in this country. We ain't on no equal footing in no country. We ain't even on equal footing in the continent of Africa in no country, because a lot of those countries are British colonized, just like America still is. America ain't the Revolutionary War, ain't break America away from Britain. We still under British control. That's why you got the new Constitution in the late 1800s, almost 100 years after the original Constitution was written. And like I said, how you gonna sit there and talk about we fighting for freedom, but you all sitting there holding slaves? Well, not all of them, but a great majority of them holding slaves. You know, the founder of the country, George Washington, had 350 of them. And you know, they told us that old lie in school about, you know, he had wooden teeth. He ain't had no wooden teeth. The part they didn't tell y'all was George Washington got his teeth. They took the teeth out of a slave's mouth and put them in George Washington. That's where he got his set of teeth from. But let me close out. I've been just kind of rambling until I found this other quote that I want to close out on. In Dialogue on Racial Prejudice, this was an article that was written in 1959. This is what a guy named Peter Letchford had to say. If I were an African and some missionary came around fishing for my soul, but obviously didn't want to have anything to do with me, I'd soon tell him to go back where he came from. Who could blame the Africans if they kicked out the missionaries? After all, it must seem like hypocrisy to the Africans that you invited the believers to the Lord's table, but they can never expect to sit down at yours. Now, isn't that powerful? And that's why you had a few years ago, I don't know if y'all heard about the missionaries going over to those black countries and they were getting killed. And all we were hearing was how savage those blacks were that were killing those missionaries. But based on what I just told you, you can understand why those blacks didn't trust white missionaries. Have a good day.